On a warm summer night in Ozark, Arkansas, June 9th, 1997, 6-year-old Emily Grace Carter tipped her glass jar, releasing the fireflies she'd caught behind the Little League bleachers. Her laughter floated across the field, the last sound anyone would ever hear from her. Minutes later, that same jar was found shattered in the grass. Beside it lay a single white shoe pressed into the mud, and deep tire tracks leading toward the river road. By the time the final inning ended, Emily was gone. No scream, no witness, just silence, and a town that would never sleep the same again. For weeks, Ozark searched the woods, the riverbanks, every back road for miles. Mothers locked their doors. Fathers stood guard on porches. And one family's hope began its long, agonizing descent into uncertainty. 25 years would pass before a forgotten DNA sample would resurface, a strand of blonde hair, a green scrap of fabric, sparking a new investigation that would shake Ozark to its core. What really happened to Emily Grace Carter that night? And why did it take decades for the truth to come to light? Where are you watching from tonight? And what year was it when your town last faced a story that changed everything? Comment your city and time zone below, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Because every week, we uncover the stories time tried to bury. Ozark, Arkansas was the kind of town where the river seemed to slow time itself. On warm June nights, the world shrank to the glow of ballpark lights and the hum of crickets, to the laughter and shouts of children slipping barefoot through cool grass. That evening, the air carried the mingled scents of popcorn, fresh-mowed clover, and sweet lemonade, drifting over the Little League field where families gathered to cheer for their kids. Summer in Ozark always felt endless, until the night the world changed forever. 6-year-old Emily Grace Carter darted between folding chairs and picnic blankets, her golden hair bouncing in a messy ponytail. She clutched a glass jar, the kind that once held peach preserves, now aglow with fireflies, tiny lanterns flickering desperately against the glass. Their faint lights danced across her smiling face, reflecting a joy that had been rare since the accident that stole her father a year before. For Sarah Carter, sitting in the bleachers, just seeing her daughter's laughter again was enough to make her forget the weight she carried every day. The game played on. Bats cracked, parents cheered, the scoreboard flickered. Emily's older brother Jason, just 9 years old, but determined to act like a man, hollered for his team, barely glancing over as his sister raced behind the stands. He was supposed to keep an eye on her. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, he let himself be just a boy, just a kid in the thrill of a summer night. The whole field shimmered beneath the yellow glow of stadium lights. Around the outfield, clusters of kids ran wild, chasing dreams and fireflies, their laughter echoing off the emptying bleachers. Sarah scanned the field for Emily, heart beating in time with the crowd's cheers, her mind drifting between the past and the present. She had promised her daughter a pink bicycle before summer's end. A small promise, but one Emily clung to. Her hope bright as the Arkansas stars. At 10:45 p.m., a red pickup truck crawled to a stop near the fence line, its engine purring low, headlights casting long shadows across the field. It was a moment anyone could have missed. A subtle intrusion in a night that felt so safe, so normal. The truck idled there, the driver's face hidden in shadow, watching the field with a patience that seemed out of place amid the chaos of childhood. Emily, feet bare and grass-stained, wandered further from the crowd, her jar held high, her world shrinking to the quiet space behind the bleachers, where fireflies gathered thickest. She knelt to tip the jar, watching as tiny wings glimmered and vanished into the dark. In that moment, time seemed suspended. The world held its breath. Somewhere nearby, an owl called. A train whistle echoed in the far distance, a lonely sound carrying over the riverbanks. The air was thick with the ordinary magic of summer, of innocence and small-town certainty, of 1,000 things parents tell themselves can never happen here. But the air was changing, charged with a tension so quiet no one noticed until it was too late. Minutes passed, unnoticed. Emily's laughter faded into the symphony of night. The headlights of the red pickup swept once more across the field, illuminating her small figure, frozen in a beam of yellow light. The engine rumbled. Gravel crunched beneath heavy tires. Then, silence, sudden and sharp, as if the world itself recoiled. The jar of fireflies tipped and rolled, its fragile light spilling out into the grass, flickering once, then fading into darkness. No one saw the shadow that fell across her, or the way the light vanished all at once. By the time the game ended and the crowd filtered away, Ozark would never be the same. What really happened that night? The answer would haunt every parent, every family, every heart in that small town for years to come. Before the darkness settled over the ball field, Ozark had always been the kind of place that seemed untouched by tragedy. It was a small community nestled along the Arkansas River, where white clapboard houses lined sleepy streets, and neighbors waved from shaded porches. On summer evenings, the air was thick with the promise of safety and routine, as if nothing bad could ever breach the gentle rhythm of their lives. The Carter family had been part of this rhythm for generations. Sarah Carter, a grade school teacher, built her world around her children. Since her husband's accident, she had worn resilience like a second skin, shuttling between work, chores, and the constant ache of loss that never quite let her go. Her love for Emily was fierce and protective. Her promise to buy that pink bicycle before summer's end more than a reward. It was a beacon of hope, something bright to cling to in a world grown suddenly uncertain. Emily Grace Carter was 6 years old, bursting with curiosity and innocence. She saw the world as a place of endless wonder, where butterflies landed on your sleeve and every dandelion was a wish waiting to be made. She loved to draw pictures of things she dreamed about, castles, rainbows, wild horses, and she carried with her a small teddy bear named Sunny everywhere she went. The bear was a gift from her father, given just days before the accident, that would leave Emily clutching it in her sleep on stormy nights. Jason Carter, at 9, had taken on the mantle of Big Brother with a seriousness that sometimes made him seem older than his years. He watched over Emily at school, helped her tie her shoes, and sometimes shielded her from the sharper edges of life, even when he didn't understand them himself. That night at the ballpark, though, Jason had been caught up in the game, shouting, running, throwing his arms up with every pitch, forgetting for a moment the silent responsibilities he carried at home. The town itself was woven from the same threads of trust and familiarity. Ozark was the sort of place where doors were left unlocked, where the postman stopped to chat about the weather, and where parents let their children roam freely, confident that nothing could touch them. It was a town defined by its people, the grocer who handed out peppermint sticks, the mechanic who fixed bikes for free, the pastor who knew every child's name. But on the night Emily disappeared, a chill swept through those well-worn streets. News traveled fast, faster than the police sirens that began to wail through the night. Within hours, the field that had been a stage for childhood dreams was overrun by searchlights, uniformed officers, and volunteers clutching flashlights and bottled water. Word spread from porch to porch, church to diner, until no one in Ozark could pretend that evil was a stranger anymore. Parents clung to their children with sudden urgency, their eyes sweeping anxiously across playgrounds and backyards. The easy trust that had bound the town together was fraying, replaced by a nervous vigilance. Strangers became objects of suspicion. People remembered things they hadn't thought twice about. The unfamiliar truck seen in a neighbor's driveway, the old man who lingered at the grocery store, the out-of-towner who had asked for directions at the gas station. Inside the Carter home, Sarah moved through the motions of grief and hope in equal measure. Emily's room remained untouched, pink walls gleaming in the afternoon light. The teddy bear, Sunny, perched on her pillow like a silent sentinel. Jason lingered by the window, watching the road, hoping for some sign, any sign, that his sister would walk up the driveway, grinning, her shoes caked with mud, her jar of fireflies held aloft in triumph. For the first time, Ozark felt the presence of something that could not be named, a shadow that slipped through locked doors and settled in every heart. The town, once a place of safety and routine, was forever changed, and in that transformation, the Carter family found themselves at the center of a mystery that would bind them and their neighbors together in fear, hope, and the desperate search for answers. The hum of the game faded as the hour grew late. Children's laughter ebbed, replaced by the low murmur of parents gathering up folding chairs, the soft crackle of gravel underfoot as cars eased out of the parking lot. Sarah Carter, though weary, allowed herself one moment to relax, watching the fireflies swirl in the warm June night. She could see Emily near the bleachers, jar held tight, blonde hair shining in the pale glow of the stadium lights. Emily's voice was soft but persistent as she tugged at her mother's sleeve. She wanted to join two other children and catch more fireflies behind the bleachers just for a few minutes. Sarah hesitated, her mother's intuition prickling, a subtle warning that flickered and faded as she saw the excitement in her daughter's eyes. 10 minutes, sweetheart. Stay where I can see you, she said at last, her words a quiet contract with fate. For a little while it seemed that nothing could shatter the delicate spell of the evening. But in that space behind the bleachers, the world grew quieter, shadows longer. The other two children scampered and returned, breathless, to their parents. Emily did not follow. She lingered at the fence, brushing sand from her shoes, her gaze caught by the sudden appearance of a man. He wore a gray ball cap, his hair streaked with silver, his build average and unremarkable. To Emily, he must have seemed just another grown-up, another shadow in a world that had never been threatening. No one saw the exchange from the stands, a small child and an unfamiliar adult, words lost to the night air, their silhouettes illuminated only by the errant sweep of the field lights. Behind them, the red pickup truck idled, the engine's soft rumble almost lost in the cacophony of crickets and distant cheers. The man knelt beside Emily, as if speaking softly, too close for comfort, but not close enough to raise an alarm. Minutes slipped by, unnoticed and irretrievable. The other children rejoined the warmth and safety of their families, but Emily remained unseen at the periphery of the field. Then a sudden, decisive moment, the rumble of the pickup's engine growing louder, headlights flickering across the fence line, catching Emily's face in their glare. The truck eased forward, then paused. There was no scream, no struggle, only the soft crunch of gravel, a door closing, a shadow swallowed by the night. Jason Carter, suddenly aware that his sister was gone, rushed to his mother's side, panic rising in his voice. But by then, the damage was done. Sarah's heart stopped as she looked for Emily and saw only emptiness. In seconds, her world fractured. She sprinted across the field, stumbling through the darkness, calling her daughter's name with a voice raw and unrecognizable even to herself. Near the fence, Sarah found a pair of small white shoes, one on its side, the other pressed deep into damp earth. The glass jar lay shattered, a faint glow still visible from a lone firefly struggling inside. There were tire tracks gouged in the mud, a sign of hasty departure. No sign of her daughter. No sound except the echo of her own breath and the distant, indifferent music of the night. The first people to reach Sarah found her on her knees in the grass, clutching Emily's shoes, her body racked with silent sobs. Jason stood beside her, silent and wide-eyed, holding tight to Sunny, the teddy bear, as if the familiar softness could offer any comfort at all. In the span of 10 minutes, the fabric of their lives had torn. There was nothing left but questions, fear, and the heavy realization that something unthinkable had happened in the space where children had always been safe. The darkness had come, sudden and silent, and taken Emily Grace Carter with it. Night in Ozark was never truly dark, at least not before that night. Sirens split the air, blue and red lights strobing against the stillness of the small town, illuminating faces drawn tight with fear and disbelief. In moments, the Little League field became the heart of a crisis. Searchlights swept across the grass where, only hours earlier, children's laughter had rung out. Now, shouts carried the names of the lost. Sarah Carter remained at the center of it all, knees stained with earth, hands clinging to Emily's shoes as if holding them tightly could summon her daughter back. Volunteers gathered, flashlights in hand, moving out into the tangled woods beyond the field and along the riverbanks. Some called Emily's name, others worked in silence, eyes trained on the ground for any sign, a scrap of fabric, a small handprint in the mud, a glint of broken glass from a firefly jar. Helicopters thudded overhead, their searchlights carving white lines across the black fields and rooftops. Dogs barked, noses pressed low, desperate to catch the scent of a child who had seemed, moments before, so utterly safe. The sheriff's car idled near the fence, radio chattering with the voices of deputies and neighboring towns alerted to the emergency. Ozark was a small town, but in crisis, it seemed everyone answered the call. Inside, Jason huddled on the sidelines, gripping Sunny, the teddy bear, to his chest. Guilt gnawed at him, an unspoken belief that somehow he should have stopped this, should have watched his sister as he'd promised. He replayed the evening over and over, looking for a moment he could change, a sign he could have caught. News spread rapidly. Reporters from nearby towns arrived as dawn bled into the sky, cameras trained on Sarah's trembling hands and hollow-eyed stare. A mother's grief was suddenly public, her heartbreak on display for neighbors and strangers alike. Emily's face, once a secret joy within the Carter household, was now everywhere. On posters taped to lampposts, gas station doors, church bulletin boards, and the windows of the corner grocery store. With the first rays of sunlight, fear settled across Ozark like a heavy blanket. Parents who once let their children wander freely now called them indoors before dark. Trust was replaced by suspicion. Neighbors eyed each other warily, wondering if danger had always been so close, invisible in plain sight. Doors that had never known locks now clicked shut with finality every evening. The rhythm of the town was changed, the innocence of its people irreversibly lost. Sarah, nearly sleepless, moved through her days like a ghost. She lingered at the window, phone clutched in hand, waiting for news that never came. Sometimes she'd stand at Emily's bedroom door, listening for a giggle or a burst of childish singing, but finding only silence and the soft golden morning light spilling across an untouched bed. Jason grew quieter, eyes haunted, avoiding the places he and his sister used to play. Emily's absence was a wound that would not close. The image of her small white shoes, her favorite butterfly hair clip, the firefly jar, these things became sacred artifacts, symbols of a life paused at its happiest moment. The community mourned, rallied, and whispered, trying to piece together what could have gone so terribly wrong. "If it could happen to Emily," a mother said, voice trembling as she pulled her child close, "it could happen to any of us." The words echoed through Ozark, a warning and a plea for the safety that once seemed guaranteed. As another night fell, searchers fanned out once more. Hope mingled with dread, and in every heart, the same question pulsed. Where was Emily Grace Carter, and would the town ever be the same again? As summer pressed on, the search for Emily Grace Carter shifted from frantic hope to grim determination. The Little League field, once a symbol of innocence, now bore the scars of tire tracks and heavy boots, its grass trampled by desperate volunteers and officers in pressed uniforms. The Franklin County Sheriff's Office established a command post in the community center. Walls plastered with maps, timelines, and Emily's school photograph, her eyes wide, hair clipped back with a butterfly barrette. Investigators moved with methodical purpose. They reconstructed the events of that night, minute by minute, piecing together witness statements and scraps of memory. Emily had left the bleachers around 10:30 p.m., a detail Sarah repeated over and over, clinging to every fragment. The red pickup, the same one whose headlights had swept across the field, was reported leaving the parking lot around 10:45. Someone, a teenager working concessions, remembered the rumble of its engine and the flash of a gray-haired driver in a ball cap. A composite sketch was circulated. An ordinary-looking man, somewhere in his 40s, Southern accent. A face so familiar, it could have belonged to any number of men in Ozark. The only physical clue was a faint boot print in the mud near the fence where Emily's shoes had been found. But it offered no answers, no match to the dozens of boots belonging to men who joined the search. As suspicion spread, the town's sense of unity began to splinter. 3 names surfaced as potential suspects. First was the quiet neighbor who often handed out candy to the children on Halloween and kept to himself the rest of the year. Whispers followed him down Main Street, eyes watching his every move. Then there was the gas station clerk who once spent a little too long chatting with Emily as Sarah pumped gas, a fact that felt more sinister in retrospect. The third was a reclusive veteran living just outside of town, rarely seen except for his occasional trips to the hardware store, his solitude now a mark against him in the court of public opinion. Deputies visited each man in turn, their questions polite but laced with urgency. Homes were searched, vehicles inspected, alibis examined and tested. But there was no evidence, no fingerprints, no fibers, no sign that any of these men had done more than live their quiet lives on the edge of a nightmare. Every promising lead dissolved into nothing, leaving behind only the residue of suspicion and the sharp pain of false hope. As the investigation dragged on, the weight of uncertainty settled over the Carter family and the entire town. Sarah's days blurred into one another, her nights sleepless, replaying every detail with agonizing clarity. She attended meetings at the sheriff's office, sat through hours of questioning, faced reporters with a resolve that grew more brittle with each passing day. Jason returned to school in the fall, his former brightness dimmed by a loss he could neither speak of nor fully understand. By the time autumn leaves began to fall, the case went cold. Posters faded in the sun and rain. The urgent energy of the search gave way to quiet resignation. Ozark, for all its efforts, returned to the routines of small-town life, though a nervous undercurrent lingered, a collective wound just below the surface. And so life resumed in the shadow of a mystery. The Carter house stood watchful and silent, Emily's absence a constant ache in every corner. The investigation remained open, files stacked neatly in the sheriff's office, a silent promise that the truth, somehow, would not be forgotten. As the years slipped quietly by, Emily Grace Carter's disappearance became more than a headline or a whispered conversation on front porches. It became part of the town's very soul. The pink walls of Emily's bedroom remained untouched, the bed always neatly made, a faded calendar on the wall frozen in June 1997, the month she vanished. The teddy bear, Sunny, sat on her pillow, fur worn thin by the small hands that once clung to it each night for comfort. The Carter home existed in a strange limbo. Sarah moved through it like a ghost, driven by rituals of hope and grief. Every year, on June 9th, the day Emily vanished, Sarah lit a candle on the porch at sunset. Neighbors and friends would gather in hushed support, the flicker of flames casting wavering shadows on their faces. The candlelight vigils became an annual tradition, their glow a silent plea to the darkness, bring her home. Time did not heal. It only changed the shape of pain. Sarah channeled her longing into action, founding the Emily's Light Foundation to support families enduring the agony of missing children. She answered calls in the middle of the night from desperate parents, wrote letters to state officials, gave interviews to reporters who struggled to find new words for old wounds. Through her, Emily's story found its way into hearts far beyond Ozark, rippling out like a stone thrown into the river. Jason, meanwhile, grew up under the long shadow of loss. The little boy who once chased his sister through sunlit fields became a man shaped by grief and quiet resolve. After graduating high school, he enrolled in the police academy, determined to make a difference, driven by the promise he'd made in silence. "I'll find the one who took you." He kept Emily's photograph in his wallet, her wide-eyed innocence a constant reminder of everything that had been lost. The case itself never closed, but as the seasons cycled and the world spun on, it grew colder. Leads trickled in, often sparked by hope more than evidence. A girl matching Emily's description was reported in Texas, another sighting in Missouri, a tip about a red pickup truck on a back road. Each time Sarah and Jason braced themselves, hope and dread in equal measure. Each time the leads evaporated, leaving only the ache of disappointment. Ozark, for all its attempts to move forward, never forgot. Emily's name was spoken in churches, written on yellowing flyers, invoked in warnings to new parents. The children who'd played with her grew up, left town, but never quite escaped the memory of her smile, or the collective guilt that something, anything, might have been done to change the outcome. Sarah often sat by Emily's window on sleepless nights, gazing at the pale moonlight that bathed the empty bed. She would press her hand to the glass, as if she could reach through time itself, whispering her daughter's name into the silence. "Can you hear me, Emily?" Sometimes, when the wind rattled the shutters or a train wailed across the river, she imagined a distant answer, an echo, a promise, a hope that refused to die. Years blurred into decades. New families moved to Ozark, unaware of the wound hidden beneath its quiet charm. But for the Carters, and for anyone who remembered that summer, the world had been divided into before and after, innocence and sorrow. The mystery of Emily's disappearance remained unsolved, her absence a constant reminder that even in the safest places, darkness can slip in unnoticed, forever altering the shape of a family, a town, a life. 25 years passed, the mystery of Emily Grace Carter's disappearance growing colder with each change of season. Life moved forward in Ozark, but the pain never fully receded. Sarah's hair turned silver, and her steps grew slow, but the light in her eyes when she spoke of her daughter remained unbroken. Jason, now an officer in a nearby town, carried the quiet burden of unanswered questions into adulthood, each day spent in the pursuit of other people's justice reminding him of the one case that had shaped his life. The Carter file sat in a dusty evidence room in the Arkansas Cold Case Unit, a thin folder dwarfed by the weight of its history. Over time, pages had yellowed and photographs faded, yet the ache behind every detail remained sharp. In the spring of 2022, a young detective named Nora Bennett arrived in Ozark, driven by a tenacious curiosity and a stubborn refusal to let go of unsolved cases. She was new to the Cold Case Unit, fresh out of the academy, full of questions, not yet weathered by disappointment. Nora pulled the Carter file one rainy afternoon, spreading its contents across her desk. Old news clippings, hand-drawn maps, blurry photographs, witness statements written in hurried script. She read everything, hunting for what others had missed. She returned again and again to the evidence list, a faded plastic bag with the label barely legible after 25 years, containing a single strand of blonde hair and a scrap of green cotton fabric. The items had once been overlooked, their potential obscured by the limits of the era's technology. The hair had been collected from the floorboard of a red pickup truck impounded years before, but DNA science in the late 1990s couldn't offer much certainty. The fabric, torn and dirt-stained, matched the shade of Emily's shirt the night she disappeared. With a careful reverence, Nora submitted both samples to the state crime lab, where advances in DNA technology could offer the clarity denied for so long. The results arrived after weeks of agonizing waiting. The hair was a partial match to Sarah Carter, a mitochondrial connection suggesting that, almost certainly, it belonged to Emily. The fabric carried traces of soil and pollen unique to the riverbanks near Ozark. For the first time in decades, the shadows that had blanketed the case began to lift. Tracing the pickup's chain of ownership, Nora discovered it had once belonged to Earl Linwood, a man who'd lived just 3 miles from the ballpark. Linwood, now dead for nearly 20 years, had been arrested in 1999 for unrelated crimes and had died in prison, his name largely forgotten. Old arrest reports painted a picture of a quiet man with few friends, known mostly for his polite greetings at the post office and a reclusive existence on the town's edge. The news crashed through Ozark like a summer storm. Neighbors who had waved to Linwood at the gas station now looked at his memory with horror and disbelief. Sarah felt the world drop away as she listened to the detective explain what the evidence suggested. All those years, the man who had likely taken her daughter had lived among them, visible but hidden behind the mask of everyday kindness. The press returned to Ozark, cameras flashing, reporters asking questions that no one was prepared to answer. Sarah stood before them, hands trembling, struggling to find words for a pain that felt as fresh as it had decades before. Jason watched from the edge of the crowd, his heart pounding with the knowledge that the story was not over, that truth could arrive decades late, carrying both relief and devastation. For Ozark, the breakthrough was a wound reopened, an old nightmare brought back into daylight. But for the Carter family, it was proof that hope and determination, even when stretched thin by time, could sometimes bring the hidden truths of the past into the light. With the breakthrough in the case, the air in Ozark grew dense with tension and anticipation. The news of Earl Linwood's connection to the evidence stirred memories long buried, igniting fresh waves of grief and fear. The story swept through town, a wildfire of rumor and shock. Old neighbors searching their recollections for a missed warning sign, parents clutching their children tighter. It seemed almost impossible that the quiet man with the gentle smile at the post office could have held such darkness. In the days that followed, FBI agents and local police descended on the Linwood property, a sagging farmhouse by the river's edge, shrouded in wild grass and tangled vines. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind, marking a perimeter where secrets might finally be unearthed. Teams combed the ground with metal detectors and cadaver dogs, eyes sharp for anything out of place among the rotting boards and rusted tools. Hope and dread mingled in the onlookers gathered beyond the tape. Neighbors, reporters, former classmates, all drawn by the gravity of unfinished tragedy. Sarah watched from her car, hands gripping the steering wheel as if bracing herself against a storm. She couldn't bring herself to step onto the property, unwilling to face the possibility that her daughter's last moments had played out in this forgotten place. Instead, she waited, her thoughts circling memories of Emily in a green shirt, skipping through the field with her jar of fireflies, every detail suddenly sharpened by the nearness of answers. The search unearthed small objects, a butterfly hair clip dulled by weather, a faded hair tie, a fragment of a child's shirt nearly lost in the weeds. Each discovery was handled with reverence, placed in evidence bags and catalogued by silent investigators whose faces betrayed the burden of their work. The town held its breath, unwilling to name aloud what these finds suggested, but unable to look away. A press conference was hastily organized in the town hall, the room crowded with reporters and residents alike. Sarah stood before the cameras, her composure fragile but unbroken, voice trembling as she spoke not just for herself, but for every parent who had ever lived in dread of such a day. She spoke of hope, of pain, of the need to bring her daughter home, whatever the truth might be. The room was silent, the weight of her words pressing down on every heart. Outside, Ozark seemed to change in subtle ways. Parents became hyper-vigilant, routines altered by caution. Children who once roamed freely were kept close, their laughter now tinged with the knowledge that monsters sometimes wore familiar faces. The town's story was told again and again on national news, its pain and endurance broadcast into living rooms across the country. The name Emily Grace Carter became a symbol, not just of loss, but of a community's refusal to forget. For Sarah, the revelation brought a strange comfort, mingled with sorrow. She lit her candle on the porch as she did every year, the flame burning against the darkness, a beacon of remembrance and longing. She knew now what she had always feared. but also understood that closure could come in many forms, not always with answers, but with the assurance that Emily's memory would never fade. Jason, too, felt the change. He stood outside the farmhouse one evening after the search had ended, staring at the river winding silently past. In his pocket, he carried the old photograph of Emily, her smile forever captured, untouched by the years and shadows that had followed. He pressed the picture to his heart, a silent promise echoing in the hush of dusk. As summer settled over Ozark, the case of Emily Carter transformed from an open wound to a solemn legacy. The truth, once hidden in darkness, had come to light at last, leaving the town to reckon with what it meant to lose, to endure, and to remember. The investigation into Emily Grace Carter's disappearance had always carried with it a sense of haunting familiarity, a shadow cast by other stories, other children lost and never found. In the aftermath of the revelations about Earl Linwood, Ozark's sorrow felt both achingly personal and tragically universal. National media began to draw direct lines between Emily's case and the real-life tragedy that had inspired it: the disappearance of Morgan Nick in Alma, Arkansas, in the summer of 1995. Morgan, like Emily, had been just 6 years old when she vanished during a Little League game. The echo between the two cases was undeniable. Small-town innocence shattered, a community gripped by fear, a family left suspended in uncertainty. As more details emerged about the red pickup truck and the suspects who had moved through both stories, the lines between fact and fiction blurred, each story amplifying the pain and urgency of the other. Television news crews camped out near the Carter home, their vans humming softly in the night. Documentary teams requested interviews, searching for insight into how a single moment could upend a family and alter the fabric of a town. Sarah Carter, despite her exhaustion, agreed to share Emily's story in hopes that it might keep other children safe, or at the very least, remind the world that the lost were not forgotten. She spoke of grief, of resilience, of the daily rituals that kept her daughter's memory alive. Each interview was a test of endurance, every question an echo of her own darkest thoughts. Jason watched these proceedings with a sense of detachment. He recognized the faces of advocates and investigators who had dedicated years to the search for Morgan Nick. Their presence offered an odd kind of comfort, proof that the Carter family was not alone in their grief, that others understood the long, uncertain wait for closure. He read about the Morgan Nick Foundation, a legacy born from heartbreak, its mission to support families in the same unending limbo his own endured. Across the country, families whose children had disappeared saw themselves in the Carters' struggle. Letters arrived from strangers, mothers and fathers who knew too well the ache of an empty bed, the quiet that settled like dust in a once happy home. Donations trickled in for Emily's Light Foundation. The work Sarah had started became her lifeline, a way to transform personal pain into collective action. In the fall, the story of Emily Grace Carter aired on a national true crime program, the photographs of a smiling girl with a butterfly hair clip flickering across millions of screens. The town's trauma became a catalyst for conversations about child safety, about the need for vigilance and community support. Parents everywhere paused a little longer when their children asked to wander out of sight. Playground rules changed, Little League games gained new security, and children learned the language of caution alongside the language of play. But for all the renewed attention, there were still no definitive answers. The fragment of green shirt, the strand of blonde hair, The belongings unearthed on Linwood's property, these clues painted a picture of what might have happened, but they could not rewrite history or return Emily to her family's embrace. The case stood as both a warning and a memorial, a story that could have happened anywhere, to anyone. As Ozark settled into the quiet of another winter, the Carter home glowed softly in the darkness, its porch candle burning steady. Emily's name and Morgan's before her became more than a headline. They were reminders to every parent, every neighbor, of the responsibilities owed to children and to each other. In this way, the story endured, not just as a tragedy, but as a call to remembrance, compassion, and action, rippling outward with every telling. 3 decades had passed since the night Emily Grace Carter disappeared, yet her memory remained woven into the very fabric of Ozark. The pink bicycle she never rode, the butterfly hair clip faded by time, and the jar that once held fireflies, all these were kept as quiet relics in the Carter home, reminders of a childhood stolen but never erased. The years moved forward, bringing new families and faces to the town, but Emily's story was never far from the surface. Her name lingered in conversations, at candlelight vigils, in the nervous instructions whispered from parents to children on summer evenings. For Sarah, the loss became something she wore not as a wound, but as an emblem of love and resilience. She poured her energy into the Emily's Light Foundation, which grew from a local support group into a statewide mission. Every family that passed through its doors carried echoes of the same pain, but also the same determination to make meaning out of loss. Sarah spoke at schools and churches, urging vigilance, compassion, and community. Her message was clear: no one should have to face such darkness alone. Jason's promise to his sister, "I'll find the one who took you," became the quiet current beneath his career. As an officer, he devoted himself to cases involving missing children, bringing empathy and understanding that could not be taught in any academy. He seldom spoke of Emily, but every action he took, every family he comforted, was a tribute to the sister he had loved and lost. The memory of her laughter, of shared secrets and summer games, remained a steady light, guiding him through even the darkest investigations. The town of Ozark, too, was changed. The disappearance of one little girl taught lessons that echoed through generations. Locks and alarms became commonplace. Parents learned the uneasy art of balancing freedom and protection. But beneath the caution grew a deeper strength, a community's resolve to protect its children, to look out for neighbors, to remember that evil could come quietly, dressed in the clothes of familiarity. On June 9th each year, Sarah lit a candle on her porch, its glow shining softly through the night. Neighbors gathered, old and new, each holding their own light, forming a river of hope down Main Street. The vigils became less about mourning and more about remembrance, solidarity, and a collective pledge. We will not forget. We will not let another child slip into the shadows unnoticed. Across Arkansas, and even the nation, Emily's name joined that of Morgan Nick and countless others, each story becoming a thread in the larger tapestry of hope and activism. These children were not defined only by tragedy, but by the movements their absence inspired, the foundations created in their names, and the children who were saved because their stories were told. The lessons endured. Never let a child out of sight, not even for a minute. Stay alert, especially in crowds or during events that draw strangers near. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, act, even if it means risking embarrassment or suspicion. Small moments of hesitation, Sarah would say, could lead to a lifetime of regret. As the story of Emily Grace Carter continued to be shared on radio shows, podcasts, in classrooms, and at kitchen tables, it grew into something larger than sorrow. It became a legacy of action and remembrance, a call to vigilance and empathy. Some wounds would never heal completely, but the truth and community could offer a different kind of comfort. The knowledge that no child would ever be forgotten, and that hope, no matter how fragile, could survive the darkest night. And so, as the candles flickered against the Ozark dusk, Sarah's voice would always carry above the hush, inviting all to listen, to remember, to join in the search for justice and healing. Emily's light shone on, not only for her, but for every missing child and every family left waiting for their own dawn.